Futures are rebounding this morning after yesterday's global market sell-off. The Dow right now up by 86 points. NASDAQ is up by 74. S&P is up by 21. The Dow closed lower by more than 1,000 points last night. The S&P having its worst day since 2022. And then Wall Street's fear gauge, that's the VIX, it hit its highest level yesterday that we had seen since the pandemic market plunge that we had in 2020. And then the other big story was the Magnificent Seven companies. They lost a combined $1 trillion in market value yesterday. NVIDIA's supermicro computer, they led the AI trade sell-off yesterday as NVIDIA's production challenges could delay shipments of its next generation AI chips. Joining me now is Brig McAdam, LTD founding partner, Republican Overseas UK Chairman Greg Swenson. Greg, good morning. Well, today is a new day and futures are rebounding, but a lot of investors still stung by what they witnessed yesterday.
Yeah, it might be a dead cat bounce, Cheryl, but you know, this is an indicator of really underlying problems. You know, the economy, I mean, obviously this is not a soft landing. There's so many problems with the economy right now. You had the bad unemployment number on Friday, but if you look beyond the headline numbers, you've got 63% of the jobs created, even though the headline number was anemic, but 63% were in government and healthcare. That's consistent with the last few months. You've got 8.4 million people with two jobs that are working at least one job and perhaps a part-time job because of the effects of inflation. So, look, this is by no means a soft landing. You've got some real fundamental problems here. I don't think it's just a fact of deleveraging from some crowded trades.
All right. Well, there is certainly multiple factors that are happening here, and you know, whether it's the Chinese economy or the Middle East. But let's talk about what's ahead. So a look at the 10-year Treasury yield this morning. We were looking at this, the 10-year and the 2-year yesterday, very closely because those were bad signals even before the market opened. But we've got new data showing that futures prices now imply the Fed's going to cut interest rates to a range of 4% to 4.25% by the end of the year. That would be 1.25 percentage point cuts over the meetings for September, November, and December. You know, investors want the Fed to issue, and several have called this out yesterday, they want an emergency rate cut. My thinking, though, is that an emergency rate cut would signal, I think that would make the markets even more upset and more concerned versus they could come in September, the 17th and then 18th is the meeting, and do that half a point cut, which now seems to be on the table.
Yeah, it seems priced in at this point, and I agree with you, Cheryl. An emergency cut would be a big mistake. You don't have one big event here. This is not like the COVID lockdowns or the financial crisis in 2008 where you had a specific housing problem. This is more like 87 where there's just some excess leverage in the market and perhaps, again, you know, some crowded trades with the Magnificent Seven, with the yen-dollar trade. So I think there's probably no reason, and that would just create more panic to do an emergency one. But this is, you know, more of a perfect storm. You've just got so many different factors. You mentioned, you know, war risk in the Middle East. You've got some other economic problems. But I think that the market's priced it in. That was accounted for a lot of the rally over the last few weeks, the anticipation of the cuts. But there's so much more work to do. I don't think the cuts will really accomplish much in terms of economic growth when you've got still, you know, major hostility to the supply side. You saw the Google decision yesterday. You've got general hostility to the supply side, to the private sector in general. And so you've got some real challenges, and I don't know that before any liberalization of the supply side that you'll see any real effects from the rate cuts.
Yeah, I know you're talking about the consumer, about the economy. I understand that. I want to bring in Rebecca Walser. Rebecca, your reaction to what you saw yesterday, and then obviously, you know, where we go from here. I mean, that's the question now. What's ahead for us?
Yeah, I think to Greg's point, it wasn't just a tech sellout of the Mag 7 and even I'd say Mag 5 right now, but it was really that plus the unemployment numbers coming in weak on Friday, plus the PMI coming in a contraction the week before. And then we really have the yen reverse carry trade, the carry trade situation, to Greg's point, which is what he was making. And Greg, I'm really curious to get your opinion on what do you think leveraged and stabilized the Japanese market today? Is it the Bank of Japan, their comments? Because obviously to go, almost over 12% down yesterday, and then a 10% recovery in one single day. I'm really curious to see what your thoughts are on that.
It's great for traders. Great question. And so if you like volatility, then, you're loving this. The VIX went up, enormously yesterday. It came down a bit overnight and came down a bit during the day yesterday. But, you're seeing the elevated VIX. You're seeing a lot of trading activity. This volatility is unprecedented. Maybe not unprecedented, but it's, definitely higher than the recent trends. So I think, that is an opportunity for traders. In terms of, long-term investors, just ride it out. I don't think there's necessarily a panic here where it just continues the tailspin. We'll see what happens over the next few days.
Right. I don't think that's the right word. I think that, look, markets, corrections happen, pullbacks happen, and sometimes that's when the smart money decides, hey, I'm going to buy a few things. Real quick before you go, you did mention Google. That is a top story for us today. That federal judge ruled that they'd illegally held a monopoly in two areas, search and text advertising. This is a blow to Alphabet and to Google. Real quick, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, first of all, I don't think it will have any impact on the consumer, which is really the fundamental reason for antitrust law. And so again, it's another example of hostility to the private sector. They're not doing it for the consumer. They're doing it to penalize big business. Then you've got all this regulatory burden that penalizes small business. So whether you're big or small, you're facing Bidenomics, you're facing headwinds from the government. Hopefully, we see a change in January.
All right, Greg Swenson, thank you for being here, Greg.
Good to be here. Thanks, Cheryl.
All right, we're just getting time for the hot topic of the hour. New overnight, Vice President Kamala Harris securing the Democratic presidential nomination. And this morning, she is expected to announce who her running mate will be. Her pick has reportedly now been narrowed down to two people, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Meanwhile, White House economic advisor Gene Sperling is leaving his administration position and heading to the Harris campaign. That move has many wondering if Sperling's addition is a sign that Harris's economic agenda is going to be just a continuation of Bidenomics, as her campaign has not released any of her plans. But it sounds like she'd be okay with more of the same. Listen.
All that, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, that is called Bidenomics. That is called Bidenomics, and we are very proud of Bidenomics.
Kamala may love Bidenomics, but voters don't seem to. And Rasmussen reports that a survey finds 53% of voters believe Bidenomics has been unsuccessful. 38% believe Harris's economic agenda is going to be worse than Biden's. In comparison, 51% say Trump's plans for the economy would be better than those of the Biden-Harris administration. And this could be why. Here's Vice President Harris when asked about how the administration would tackle inflation.
Well, let's start with this. Prices have gone up. Families and individuals are dealing with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up. That's about having to stress and stretch limited resources. That's about a source of stress for families that is not only economic, but is on a daily level, something that is a heavy weight to carry. So it is something that we take very seriously.
Another hint of what Kamala's economic agenda could entail: an increase in taxes.
So these are some of the ways, but we've got to increase the corporate tax rate. We also have to increase taxes for the top 1%. And that part of that is going to be about repealing that tax bill that they just passed. And also looking at estate taxes are going to have to go up for the richest Americans.
All right, Trish, I want to bring you into this because two things. First, we don't have our economic agenda. And then also bringing in Gene Sperling. This is a signal that it's going to be the same if it's Gene Sperling that's going to be advising her.
Exactly, Cheryl. And I think that the real issue is even just symbolically speaking. I mean, you are taking that economy and wearing it around your neck as an albatross, because she's showing no daylight in the last 16 days between her and the Biden administration's policies. That all being said, I think that this is essential why she needs to sit down for an interview. What actually is her plan? Does she have any daylight between the Biden administration, or is this a referendum of the last 4 years?
Yeah, and the corporate taxes, she has brought that up before. When she was Attorney General in California, Rebecca, she went after big oil. She has not really been a business-friendly candidate ever. But if you're going to win in the general election, you're going to have to go to the center to grab the moderates, and that seems to be what she's trying to do. But the Sperling pick makes me kind of wonder if even if she gets in, she goes right back to pitching 35% on cap gains, as we're showing here, the estate tax, financial, and of course the corporate tax rate.
You know, Cheryl, I don't like to be hyperbolic on things, but I will just say that at this point, Kamala Harris, she is economically unviable. She is not a truly viable economic presidential candidate, in my opinion, and I will tell you why. She is on record multiple times as talking about, hey, we need Medicare, basically, we need health care for everyone. And then she also is on record of letting people come in, yelling at us about having Christmas when we're turning people away at the border. She's on record. Go look that up. So if she thinks she's going to get into the office and have this open border policy that this administration has had, and then everyone is going to get Medicare for all, or basically health care for all, when Americans don't even have health care for all. We haven't been able to afford health care for all because we have over 330 million people living here.
We talked about she's changing, though, her position. She is making political calculations and changing her positions, and she's already done that on fracking. She's already done that on Medicare for all. I have a feeling she is going to try, Tricia, to your point, I think she's going to try to distance herself from Bidenomics. And I do want to ask you something else as we wait this VP pick. Josh Shapiro, which if it's between Waltz and Shapiro, I think a lot of folks do think it's going to be Shapiro. He has been the governor of Pennsylvania. I'm going to bring in business. Yes. I'm going to be business friendly, and he has. So if you're trying to appeal to that moderate Republican, undecided Republican, et cetera, maybe that isn't a Trump fan, maybe Shapiro is how you go after that person.
I think politically and electorally, we see that all roads really lead to Pennsylvania. To the degree that a VP pick even truly matters, it's at the margins. And Shapiro, let's be realistic, could help Kamala get across the finish line there. That all being said, he has a base problem with progressives, whether it be school choice, whether it be these corporate tax cuts, being more business friendly. But I have to also say there's something a little bit disturbing about all the rhetoric around Shapiro. Waltz actually has been more pro-Israel, and vocally so, meeting with Netanyahu, advocating for Israel time and time again. And yet Shapiro, because of his faith, is the one who's getting real scorn on this.
But again, that business friend... And she needs Pennsylvania. She needs Michigan, but she needs Pennsylvania. Yes. So, I mean, Minnesota, excuse me.
She's going to have to become more moderate.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Yeah, she needs Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia. All right, well, we've got time for the hot topic of the hour. The Biden-Harris administration accused of releasing nearly 100 migrants on the terror watch list into the U.S. when Kamala Harris was border czar. A new House Judiciary report charges from 2021 to 2023 that Border Patrol encountered 250 suspected terrorists, 99 of them released into the U.S., while 34 others are still in Department of Homeland Security custody. The report also says that Border Patrol has encountered tens of thousands of migrants from countries that could pose national security risks, including more than 2,000 Afghan nationals and more than 33,000 Chinese nationals. Migrants from at least 36 different countries have been apprehended at the southern border under the Biden-Harris administration, including Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, Pakistan, Syria, and Yemen. Here's what Kamala Harris had to say back in 2016 about the terms illegal alien and Islamic terrorism. Listen to this.
You must have the courage to object when they use that term, radical Islamic terrorism, which ignores how Muslims have overwhelmingly been the greatest victims of terror.
Meanwhile, ICE says that a Colombian gang leader wanted for murder was caught by Border Patrol and then was released into the United States, roaming free for nearly a year before being arrested last week in Maryland. Rebecca, this is certainly disconcerting because if you look at the terror watch list, unfortunately, we don't know who these people are, where they're going. We get a sense of the countries that they're coming from, very dangerous countries in this nation. And unfortunately, they're in this nation. They're now in the United States. And this is very, very disconcerting and very worrisome for anyone that is concerned about what we're seeing on the U.S. border.
You know, Cheryl, 100% positive, true. And the fact is, look at the fentanyl that comes over. And we know that source from China. So my question is, you mentioned that report, 33,000 Chinese nationals have come over. How do they get out of China? This is a surveillance communist country. They have cameras on everything you do in every public square. And how are they getting out of China? So in other words, they're leaving China with permission. That's the only way out of China. So what is happening that this administration doesn't realize? We are being invaded by probably, in my opinion, our greatest enemy, China.
Yeah, Tricia.
Not to mention these members of the cartel, where the cartels are not actually designated as terrorist organizations. So what other entities are entering into our country that are causing harm to God knows how many Americans? I mean, 100,000 Americans are killed each year from fentanyl. They're smuggling those drugs over, and we have no idea how many of them are in this country.
Yeah, and that's very concerning, obviously, because, this is in a presidential year when you have a vice president who is now running for president, who was put in charge of the border. You know, and of course, when you say things, these things come back to haunt you because it's on video.
Right.
So look at this, guys. So this is a resurfaced social media clip, and it's Vice President Harris saying this, that everybody needs to be woke. Listen to her.
We have to stay woke. Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke. Yeah.
These comments come after Harris said that she gets upset over migrants being turned away after they have, quote, been standing in for 2 years to qualify for refugee status. Kamala also reportedly adding her brother-in-law, Tony West, to her campaign team. He represented the American Taliban, John Walker Lynn, who abandoned the U.S. to train with Osama bin Laden and fight for the Taliban in Afghanistan before being captured back in 2001. West also served for five years in the Obama administration's Justice Department. He's going to serve as a, quote-unquote, powerful advisor to the Harris campaign. That's now, Tricia, according to Axios. You know, lead counsel for Uber apparently was in the room the day that Biden quit, according to the New York Times, and hopped on the phone immediately for her.
I think it's pretty stunning. I think a lot of people, whether it be Biden or whether it be Harris, they feel like they're both just really puppets for the system. And when they're surrounding themselves with these very progressive, possibly terrorist sympathizing individuals, it's really stunning for not just Americans, but globally, our allies. Who are they saying they're getting advice from? Will we stand by our allies? Will we stand by Israel should there be a Kamala Harris term?
Yeah, I don't know, Rebecca. It's certainly, again, we're waiting on the policies. We're waiting on the economic policies. We've discussed that. But we do know her record on the border. We do know her record and the things that she said about AI, which is kind of where that word salad jokes really started with her, was her trying to explain to what it sounded like a room of 5-year-olds, but it was actually adults, about what AI meant.
You know, I love the American people. I love the Constitution. I'm a lawyer. That's why I went to law school, but I love finance more. But the point is that, you know, when you have a candidate that this is unprecedented, when you have a president who is running for re-election, steps aside as close as he does 4 months before the election, and then the vice president gets delegated in by the delegates. I mean, it was all done through the delegates. I'm not saying it wasn't, but the point is that she hasn't been elected through the primary process, which means we don't vet her positions. We don't know them. And if she's going to be a continuation of Bidenomics and open border policy, which I think is going to come back to bite us, you know, when there is a global, yesterday was a scare, and it could be a dead cut bounce, or it could be the beginning of something unraveling. And if we don't have the right person at the helm leading us through the global chaos that is supposedly coming, you know, then what are we doing? We have to know her positions, and it's not, American people do not accept the media just putting out that she has no plans and that she's just going to all these interviews. Let's get her policies.
Final word.
I have a quick prediction. I think the first time Harris will sit down for an interview, much less a press conference, is going to be with that VP nominee. Why? Because they will be her shield. They will praise her endlessly as the first, but also that person's probably going to be more articulate than she is because it's not that hard to be.
So that would be today, Tricia.
Wow.
I think
Essentially prediction.
I mean,
Yeah.
why not do a gaggle? Let's do a quick press conference. Get the heat. I mean, there's such little
There's
heat
going
on
to be
her
a
right now.
pre-recorded phone call that says, "Hi, you've made it."
We made it.
You never know. Believe me, you never know with this election cycle at this point. It's anybody's game. All right, we've got a lot more coming up. And good morning. I'm Cheryl Casoni. I'm in for Maria Bartiromo. It is Tuesday. It is August 6th, 7 a.m. on the East Coast. It's time now for the word on Wall Street. Top investors watching your money. Joining me now is LPL Financial Chief Global Strategist Quincy Crosby. Also with me, Rebecca Walser. Quincy, well, let's start with you. So much to talk about. We've got a real rebound hitting us right now. If you can see the Dow on your screen, we're up 304 for the Dow Jones Industrials. The NASDAQ is now making even a better rebound, up 168. S&P as well. But this is after that massive sell-off yesterday that was global. The Dow losing more than 1,000 points. The S&P 500, worst day since 2022. And that fear gauge, the VIX, highest level since the pandemic market plunge of 2020. Now, European markets this morning, it was a rough start with Europe. Now you can see the FTSE and the DAX have actually come back a little bit. And then we talked a lot, Quincy, about the Magnificent Seven. They lost a combined $1 trillion in market value yesterday. NVIDIA, supermicrocomputer, that was kind of that AI trade that unwound. What do you make of everything that you saw yesterday and the rebound you're seeing right now?
You know, yesterday was a combination of so many issues for the market. It was AI. It was NVIDIA coming in and saying there'd be a delay in delivery of one of their major products. It was the worry over the fact that the companies are not monetizing the generative AI as quickly as possible. So that got the market worried. But it was also regarding the worries over the economy and whether or not the economy, especially the labor market, is moving into a situation in which the Fed looks like it's behind the curve. So the market's trying to figure that out. And then added to all of this, we had the unwinding of a major trade, it's called the carry trade, thanks to the Japanese yen climbing much higher. And across the world, these were unwinding. So what happens is the market then worries about contagion. It worries about something blowing up, some hedge fund, some bank, somewhere around the world just blowing up and then causing more damage. So there was calm. We haven't seen the contagion, and the market is due for a bounce. It becomes now oversold, and it's due for a bounce, and that's what we have this morning.
Well, what you're saying is what they write about this morning in the Heard on the Street column in the Wall Street Journal, and they say stocks are crashing, but that's a great reason to sit tight, and it's exactly what you're saying. They say the sudden sell-off in Japanese equities and that VIX jump is being exaggerated by the trend chasers. And Rebecca brought up the issue of Japan as well and the yen trade. So, look, I mean, you know, at this point, it's a lot of things. I'm glad you brought that up. I do want to talk to both of you about Google. This is a major ruling against this company. So this federal judge has said now that Google illegally held a monopoly in two market areas, search and text advertising. The case alleging Google has kept its share of the general search market by creating strong barriers to entry and a feedback loop that sustained the dominance. The ruling marks the first anti-monopoly decision against a tech company that we've seen in decades. Rebecca, what did you make of this?
It was the first ruling that we've got against a tech company in decades, Cheryl, because they haven't prosecuted a tech company in decades. The Justice Department has been like, whatever. And to see this actually, an anti-Sherman case actually, you know, come out and win for the government, it's amazing. And really, Cheryl, I read the case, and basically they really honed in on the fact that the Android phones and the Apple phones were coming pre-programmed with Google search engine and didn't have the ability to go beyond that.
But they pay for that. They pay Google for that.
I guess you can pay to monopolize every, 90% of the smartphones, and that it makes it a monopoly.
Doesn't Google pay the phone maker?
Yeah, Android and Google and Apple and Google, absolutely. Alphabet had contracts, but that in and of itself is monopolistic.
A monopoly.
And so the judges basically said, you do have a monopoly, period.
Quincy, that's why I've got Rebecca here, because of her legal background, along with her financial background. But what do you say about this Google story?
What I say about it is, the case began in 2020. Now it's 2024. They are going to appeal. And Google, as all of big tech, has an army of former Department of Justice lawyers waiting for just something like this. And they go in before you even get a case going to make sure it doesn't happen. Now it happened. They're going to go and fight this. And we're going to be watching this because other big tech is also worried about this.
All right. I do want to look at earnings real quick here, Rebecca, because top of the hour, we've now had Uber cross, Yum Brands has crossed. Yum Brands in particular, they did beat on earnings per share, but they did miss on revenue. And then both KFC, Pizza Hut, same-store sales actually coming in down. On the heels of McDonald's, I guess I shouldn't be surprised on that. The stock is up almost 0.5%. And then Caterpillar, double beat, lifted by demand for excavators and other construction equipment on increased infrastructure spending in the U.S. And then Uber, mentioned that one, Cat's up. By the way, Caterpillar is a Dow component. And then here's Uber. Stock it's holding steady right now. They had a double beat, steady demand for ride sharing and food delivery. And then the monthly active platform consumers up actually 14%. Total trips for the quarter, 21% higher. That's $3 billion. That is a very bullish number.
Yeah.
For Uber, and then obviously Fox Corporation, the parent of this network, is coming up, and then Disney, Warner Brothers, Discovery, they're all coming out tomorrow, Paramount Global. So but let's focus on Uber and Yum Brands, Rebecca. I think that's the story right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is actually a positive, right? With consumer sentiment coming down, Cheryl, and with, us seeing McDonald's and Burger King really struggling for their value menus to even be picked up, saying that consumers out of cash. For Yum to come in, looks like with at least a beat on earnings, that just means, even though revenue is down, Cheryl, that just means they're really good at cost containment and doing other things, whether it be, with the hourly workers or expenses. They're containing costs. Uber is actually also a very positive to the upside surprise because, again, if you don't have money, how are you going out and affording a ride sharing app? So this is all both actually really good, economically speaking. It's a good omen.
As much as we talk about the concern about the consumer, I feel a little bit better seeing Yum Brands and Uber cross this morning. Quincy Crosby, it's great to see you. Thank you for being here. Rebecca, you're going to stay with us all morning long. Time for the hot topic of the hour. The Biden-Harris administration accused of releasing nearly 100 migrants on the terror watch list into the U.S. when Kamala Harris was border czar. A new House Judiciary report charges from 2021 to 2023 that Border Patrol encountered 250 suspected terrorists, 99 of them released into the U.S., while 34 others are still in Department of Homeland Security custody. The report also says that Border Patrol has encountered tens of thousands of migrants from countries that could pose national security risks, including more than 2,000 Afghan nationals and more than 33,000 Chinese nationals. Migrants from at least 36 different countries have been apprehended at the southern border under the Biden-Harris administration, including Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, Pakistan, Syria, and Yemen. Here's what Kamala Harris had to say back in 2016 about the terms illegal alien and Islamic terrorism. Listen to this.
You must have the courage to object when they use that term, radical Islamic terrorism, which ignores how Muslims have overwhelmingly been the greatest victims of terror.
Meanwhile, ICE says that a Colombian gang leader wanted for murder was caught by Border Patrol and then was released into the United States, roaming free for nearly a year before being arrested last week in Maryland. Rebecca, this is certainly disconcerting because if you look at the terror watch list, unfortunately, we don't know who these people are, where they're going. We get a sense of the countries that they're coming from, very dangerous countries in this nation. And unfortunately, they're in this nation. They're now in the United States. And this is very, very disconcerting and very worrisome for anyone that is concerned about what we're seeing on the U.S. border.
You know, Cheryl, 100% positive, true. And the fact is, look at the fentanyl that comes over. And we know that source from China. So my question is, you mentioned that report, 33,000 Chinese nationals have come over. How do they get out of China? This is a surveillance communist country. They have cameras on everything you do in every public square. And how are they getting out of China? So in other words, they're leaving China with permission. That's the only way out of China. So what is happening that this administration doesn't realize? We are being invaded by our, probably, in my opinion, our greatest enemy, China.
Yeah, Tricia.
Not to mention these members of the cartel, where the cartels are not actually designated as terrorist organizations. So what other entities are entering into our country that are causing harm to God knows how many Americans? I mean, 100,000 Americans are killed each year from fentanyl. They're smuggling those drugs over, and we have no idea how many of them are in this country.
Yeah, and that's very concerning, obviously, because, this is in a presidential year when you have a vice president who is now running for president, who was put in charge of the border. You know, and of course, when you say things, these things come back to haunt you because it's on video.
Right.
So look at this, guys. So this is a resurfaced social media clip, and it's Vice President Harris saying this, that everybody needs to be woke. Listen to her.
We have to stay woke. Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke. Yeah.
These comments come after Harris said that she gets upset over migrants being turned away after they have, quote, been standing in for 2 years to qualify for refugee status. Kamala also reportedly adding her brother-in-law, Tony West, to her campaign team. He represented the American Taliban, John Walker Lynn, who abandoned the U.S. to train with Osama bin Laden and fight for the Taliban in Afghanistan before being captured back in 2001. West also served for five years in the Obama administration's Justice Department. He's going to serve as a, quote-unquote, powerful advisor to the Harris campaign. That's now, Tricia, according to Axios. You know, lead counsel for Uber apparently was in the room the day that Biden quit, according to the New York Times, and hopped on the phone immediately for her.
I think it's pretty stunning. I think a lot of people, whether it be Biden or whether it be Harris, they feel like they're both just really puppets for the system. And when they're surrounding themselves with these very progressive, possibly terrorist sympathizing individuals, it's really stunning for not just Americans, but globally, our allies. Who are they saying they're getting advice from? Will we stand by our allies? Will we stand by Israel should there be a Kamala Harris term?
Yeah, I don't know, Rebecca. It's certainly, again, we're waiting on the policies. We're waiting on the economic policies. We've discussed that. But we do know her record on the border. We do know her record and the things that she said about AI, which is kind of where that word salad jokes really started with her, was her trying to explain to what it sounded like a room of 5-year-olds, but it was actually adults, about what AI meant.
You know, I love the American people. I love the Constitution. I'm a lawyer. That's why I went to law school, but I love finance more. But the point is that, you know, when you have a candidate that this is unprecedented, when you have a president who...
Good morning. I'm Cheryl Casoni. I'm in for Maria Bartiromo. It is Tuesday, August 6th. It's 8 a.m. on the East Coast, and futures are rebounding this morning after yesterday's global market sell-off. The Dow is up 15 points right now. Nasdaq is up 158. The S&P is up 36 and change. The Dow closing down more than 1,000 points last night. The S&P 500 having its worst day since 2022. Wall Street's fear gauge, that's the VIX, hitting its highest level yesterday since the pandemic market plunge of 2020. And then a look at European markets this morning. We did see red across the board earlier, then a retrenchment. Now the FTSE, the CAC 40, and the DAX are once again lower. The Magnificent Seven, those companies losing a combined $1 trillion in market value yesterday. NVIDIA, supermicro computer, leading the AI trade sell-off yesterday as NVIDIA's production challenges could delay shipments of its next generation of AI chips. And we should point out all of the Magnificent Seven are lower again this morning, despite the markets coming back higher. Let's bring in Crossmark CEO and Chief Investment Officer Bob Dahl. Bob, good morning. It's always great to speak with you. What is your reaction to what we've seen in the last 24 hours?
Well, it's nice to see the green on the screen today, but we have to go back to last week. Even before that, the economy has been weakening for some time, and I think The employment report on Friday woke a lot of people up to say, it's not as good as I thought. Inflation may not be going to 2%. We may not go double-digit earnings growth this year and next year. And stocks are pretty expensive. I think I'll sell a stock or two. And, of course, the Japanese yen carry trade clearly exacerbated the direction and the amount of the move. So we're in a reflex rally now. We probably have to come back and test. I'm not sure we've seen the lows yet, Cheryl.
Okay, I want to bring in Rebecca Walser to this conversation because Rebecca is saying the same thing. You two share in that sentiment. Rebecca, go ahead.
Yeah, Bob, I just love that you brought up the yen carry trade and the reverse carry trade. I know that it's some $4 trillion, and we certainly didn't see it all unwind yesterday with the Bank of Japan coming out this morning and kind of soothing comments about future rates and where it's going after the July 31st hike. What are your thoughts on this being unwound and still being a problem globally, even if we have a little bit of a recovery dead cut bounce here today?
I agree with your sentiment. That is, this problem is not necessarily over. The veracity of it may be over, but there's more of that trade to unwind, and that will put pressure on most risk assets over the next few days.
All right, let's talk about the 2-year and the 10-year in particular. Let's look at the 10-year Treasury this morning, because right now, and obviously that was yesterday morning, the 2 and the 10 were the two signals that I really noticed were giving us pause besides the numbers on the screen. But now you've got this conversation about the Fed, and futures are showing that basically the Fed, the prediction is they're going to cut interest rates to a range of 4% to 4.25% by the end of the year. But that means we'd have to get 1.25 percentage points in cuts over meetings September, November, December. And, Bob, we've had some investors say we need an emergency rate cut. What would that signal to the market, in your opinion?
My guess is if the Fed goes between meetings, people will say, oh, my goodness, something's really wrong. It's very rare they do that. Now, they talk a lot so they can condition the market to say something like, look, if conditions don't improve, we'll have to lower rates by 50 instead of 25. And there's signals they can send short of doing a cut between meetings.
All right. Well, yeah, exactly. And we already had one Fed official speak yesterday. And we have time until the meetings, which again is the 17th of September. All right, so let's talk about earnings with you. Caterpillar, Dow component, they had a double beat this morning. They were lifted by demand for excavators, other construction equipment, increased infrastructure spending in the United States. That helped Caterpillar. That stock's up more than 4.5%. Obviously, that's helping the Dow this morning. You have Uber. That's up 6% right now. Uber, that was a double beat, steady demand for ride sharing and food delivery services. And then their monthly active platform consumers up 14%. Total trips for the quarter up 21% at nearly 3 billion. And then Fox Corporation, the parent company of this network, fractionally lower the stock is, but they did beat on earnings. They did miss on revenue, television revenue hitting 1.62 billion, and the cable network programming revenue hit $1.4 billion. And I want to add here, we're going to get Disney, Warner Brothers Discovery. That's tomorrow. Paramount Global is Thursday, Bob. So what are your thoughts so far on what you're seeing with these numbers?
So if we look at second quarter earnings reports so far, they've been better than many people thought, myself included. If I wanted to pick on those earnings, I'd say the top line revenue didn't live up to expectations. So in other words, they had to come from better margins, which are only sustainable for so long. I think we will begin to see, as the economy has slowed and will continue to, companies ratchet back some of the earnings expectations. So for the back half of this year, I think we're going to see some more earnings disappointments as companies begin to cut costs. That's why the employment numbers are fading somewhat. I know we had weather, et cetera, that affected last week's number, and we don't want to hang our hat on one number. But my guess is the very robust earnings expectations probably are not going to be met.
Well, look, McDonald's, I think, was the first sign that something's going on with the consumer, in particular at the lower end. When McDonald's misses global sales by 1%, and it's a great deal, that's a surprise. I do want to ask you about Google before you go. So that federal judge did rule that Google has illegally held a monopoly in two market areas, search and text advertising. This alleges that Google had kept its share of the general search market by creating strong barriers to entry and a feedback loop that sustained its dominance. And this marks the first anti-monopoly decision against a tech company in decades. Do you think that we're going to see more actions like this in the courts against big tech?
I suspect we will, especially if the Democrats win in November. Look, these lines are not black and white. They're gray, and so there's room for a lot of interpretation. But I suspect we will see more of that against these mega cap tech companies, yes.
All right. Alphabet is lower this morning, and we're going to watch that stock. Bob Dahl, always great to see you. It's been a while. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you soon. All right, we are